Hi, I'm Rachel Cargill, and I'm super excited, one, to just be at this table, to be back in New York City. If some of you know, I moved away back home to Ohio, so I'm so happy to be back. Hi, all my friends. And so this is the greatest honor to be in conversation about Zora Neale Hurston. And like I said, to be at this incredible table with such brilliant, dynamic women. And tonight we're celebrating both the life and the work of Zora Neale Hurston as a novelist, a folklorist, and an anthropologist. And so there's a lot of layers to her, and I'm excited to explore it through conversation with these people here tonight. So discussing the enduring legacy of Zora, as well as the two books that are out now, Hitting a Straight Lick with a Crooked Stick, and I Love Myself When I Am Laughing, The Reader. And these are just incredible collections that we just are indulging in, and I'm so excited about it. Can we turn the music down a little? Is that here, or is it in the store? Oh, okay, thanks. Okay, so let me introduce everyone that's here. Bridget Davis is the author of the memoir, The World According to Fannie Davis, which is an incredible book in the line of Zora Neale Hurston that really explores Blackness, our understanding of ourselves, and her book is available here today as well, so make sure you pick that up. Who's next? Morgan Jerkins is the senior editor at Zora and a visiting assistant professor at Columbia University School of the Arts. Her debut essay collection, This Will Be My Undoing, was a New York Times bestseller, and her second book, Wandering in Strange Lands, is forthcoming in May 2020 from Harper Books. Jamia Wilson is a feminist activist, writer, and speaker. She is also the director of the Feminist Press at the City University of New York and the former VP of programs at the Women's Media Center. And we're up to Mahogany Brown, a writer, organizer, and educator, and executive director of Urban World NYC and poetry coordinator at St. Francis College. So a round of applause. For all of these brilliant minds. So my first question for you all, and all of my questions are for everyone. Jump in, you know how we do in conversations, say what you need, hype each other up, ask more questions. My first question is, do you remember when you first discovered Zora Neale Hurston's work? And maybe as importantly as when you first discovered it, how did it make you feel? Anyone?
Oh no, I was just holding it. Oh. We bring these to us, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You guys.
I have you can hear me fine, right? I have a very vivid memory of when I learned about Zora Neale Hurston, whom it turns out died the year I was born. So that tells you a little bit about me, if you know a little bit about her. So I was literally sitting in my class at Spelman College, and the author who was visiting the class was Alice Walker.
Wow.
And it turned out that my professor and she had gone to college together at Spelman. So she invited her back. And that was 1979. And guess what came out in 1979? This reader about Zora Neale. And Alice Walker was telling us about it. And so afterwards, it was extraordinary to hear her story. She talked about how she discovered Hurston's grave and, planted a marker there. It was quite riveting because we had never heard of her. We were all young women who had, gone to decent high schools, but we had never heard of this woman. And so afterwards, our professor required us to purchase the reader, and that's where I discovered her work. Thank God, thank you, Feminist Press, for making this exist, because as you may know, it's excerpts of all her work. So it's ironic, there were many years that went by before I actually read the novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, because it wasn't readily available yet. But this excerpt was in the book, and that's how I got introduced to her. So I still can remember sitting under a magnolia tree on campus, thumbing through it, so excited.
And how did it make you feel? Excited?
Oh, I just thought, I really felt like I had found a kindred spirit. I didn't know why at the time, because I hadn't identified as a writer yet, but I understood on some level that this was a relationship that was going to be long-lasting. And it started in that moment, when I got a chance to read her work for the first time. You read Zora Neale Hurston, you've never read anything like it before. So you already know you're in this special space. So, yeah, that feeling never left. So
I love it.
It's really great. Yeah.
Anyone else want to talk about their first time?
It's really hard to follow up after that.
Right. She said magnolia tree, and I was like, well, I was on the couch. I ain't had no trees. I do remember reading Their Eyes Are Watching God in AP English, and it was because of Zora that I felt that I had the right to do a remix. We had to do an assignment where we remixed a classic, and I chose Dante's Inferno, and I remixed it with NWA lyrics. Ooh. Thanks. I wish y'all were my teacher. And I only did it because I read Zora Neale Hurston's work, and I saw my grandmother, who's from Houma, Louisiana. I saw my grandfather. I saw my maternal grandmother, who's from Rosedale, Texas, and I was like, oh, this sounds like home. And I had always been told you can't speak a certain way in school, and then I was reading the text in school, so I thought, all right, bet I'm about to do what we're doing on the streets, like perfect. And of course I was reprimanded and told that I had to do that assignment again or I wasn't going to get a grade. Wow. So I knew that she was doing something magical and that she was giving me permission to do so, even if my teacher was saying that there was a difference between us. And so I felt like an outlaw reading her. I felt like I had a hidden gem. And I came back to her when I moved to New York City. I taped on my little desk the quote where she says, "Woman is the mule of the world," and the other quote where she said, "A woman's mouth is her greatest weapon." And because of that, like I walk in the room and I'm loud and brash and unfuckwittable.
I love that concept of ancestral permission. Just throwing that out there. Does anyone else want to share their first stories? Or we can...
Sure.
Yeah.
So I just want to touch the book. Thank you. So this book is really special to me. As the director and publisher of Feminist Press, we're in our 50th anniversary year now, and this book is also upon an anniversary now, coming out a few years after we began. And although I wasn't here 50 years ago on this earth, this book is a part of, I believe, a connection to my chapter that I'm going to be about in the story of the Feminist Press as the first woman of color to direct it. And the reason it's so special to me is because I was first introduced to Zora with this book by my own mother, who is now deceased, but was my very best friend and soulmate. And she gave this book to me when I was in high school and said that this was a really important book for me to read, and pointed out essays in it like How It Feels to Be Colored Me to help me navigate being in a mostly white school. Because although my school was a feminist school, it had been started by blue stocking feminists. I was one of 12 black people there, and I definitely had my moments of thinking about what does it mean to have an entirely different experience that, like you said, I don't talk about with many people with, or have family members who use entirely different language than my classmates. So I found a sense of home in this book while I was in boarding school, and would be up late reading this instead of my assignments. And the other reason this book is so important to me is that we approached Alice Walker as we knew that the 50th anniversary was going to come, and said, we really want to know what this book means to you now. Can you write an editor's note and help contextualize it in the context of this anniversary of 50 years of feminist publishing, but also now that Zora is so much more widely known thanks to the reemergence of her voice through your connection to this work. Right. And she wrote a really beautiful editor's note I'd like to point you to in here that is just as beautiful as the introduction she originally wrote. And also just in terms of the actual physical book, the cover was so beloved to me when I got it. There was something about, like you said, that the passion that was conveyed, the confidence, the just full self-possession of this beautiful, bold Black woman, the tilt of her hat, that really captures you and made me have my spine go up a little more. And so it was important to have this cover come back, but with a sort of new packaging to also bring in a new generation of readers. And when we came up to put the book out again, we thought, oh, well, there's some permissions we're going to have to get that are not inexpensive. And it's going to take a village to crowdfund this as a nonprofit press. And so we did, and we have community members, including myself, who were donors to make this book happen again. And for me, it was really beautiful because I donated my contribution in honor of my mother, who first gave me this book, whose name is now going to be in this book for anyone to read. So for me, it's a really special book because I think it carries the stories of many Black women who Zora herself talks about, her story as well, but also Black women in publishing and the women who helped introduce them to stories that connected them with their sense of self and legacy.
Beautiful.
Do you have a story, Morgan, or you want to hop into another question?
I'll hop to another.
Okay, we can hop into another question. Okay, so one of the really exciting things about both of these being published in such conjunction is that there's so much to dive into. We don't feel like we're missing much. There's so much to read through and indulge in. And I'm interested in knowing and especially with two people having direct conversation with Alice Walker and her deep commitment to Zora being seen and heard and appreciated. What do you think it is about now that has us kind of grasping onto her words and feeling the need to not only unbury her, but to celebrate her and to be in a deep sense of Zora is who we love and need more than ever in this moment, to where I'm happy to buy 2 whole books to read and read and read and indulge in of her work. I'd love to hear from you. What is it about this current climate or our current existence as a people, as America or as Black women, and what Zora is offering us?
I think we're in the middle of a renaissance.
I like that.
In literature, arts, film, the whole gamut. And I feel like Black women are speaking up and saying, we need to give each other flowers, whether they're alive or dead. And so I've noticed a pattern in the past couple of years where it would be talking about like hidden figures, for example. Katherine Johnson just passed away, actually. 101 years old. Thinking about, I think, Jessie Fawcett, who was another person of the Harlem Renaissance that was crucial to it. And then now Zora Neale Hurston, where it's like when Alice Walker discovered her grave, there was no carving on her grave. There were just snakes everywhere. So I think we're just in such a fertile period to speak the names of these people who, if it weren't for their efforts, none of us would be sitting here. And so that's why I think there's such a fascination with Zora, not only because she was a product of one of the most creative periods of American history, but also because there's just an abundance of her work. Nonfiction, short stories, anthropological work, all of that. It's just, you can just be full. So I think that's, now's the time.
Well said.
Yeah, she was across the genres. I love that about her. She's that artist that you can teach her in any classroom, any subject. But I also love that you said that we're giving her the flowers that she deserved, because I think she is the originator of the Black Girl Magic idea, right?
Yes,
Ntozake said it in 1976, but she lived it. She did it. So she had to give us we had a blueprint because of her. And she wasn't categorical. You couldn't just say, okay, she just does this one type of thing. She did all of the things, which is magical.
Yes, absolutely.
I really value that deeply about her, especially as someone who has studied anthropology, particularly at Columbia, and seeing how her name wasn't brought up in classrooms as much as it deserved to be, but also the way, if you know anything about anthropology, it's deeply nauseatingly colonial, and for her to come in and say, this isn't what it's about to be about, and I'm going to use the tools that are given to me to really give back to my community, to give back to myself, to highlight and celebrate ourselves, like Morgan said. And so for her to be like, she's not just celebrated like this in the literary community. She has such power in the social sciences, in even as I was reading, thinking about her definition, how she continuously offered herself self-care unapologetically. And yeah, there's so much that we were able to pull from her. Did anyone else want to comment on why it's important now that we're really digging into her? I think you kind of talked on it, Jamia, with kind of the jump between then and now, especially the cover. I love that.
I just wanted to say one thing about this beautiful flowers metaphor. I love how you were writing while we were on stage right now. You know, I feel like you're just such a beautiful wordsmith. I just want to honor that and give you flowers. But I was thinking about that metaphor, and I was thinking about the grave, and we were kind of talking about this and honoring people after they transition. And she wrote a letter to W.B. Du Bois saying, why don't we have our own cemetery for Negro artists, as she wrote it, like they have in France, honoring the best in their arts and culture. And she didn't use the language we would kind of use it now, but she was kind of like, why aren't you using your position in male privilege, W.B. Du Bois, to elevate this? You are the person in our community, in our cohort, who can make this happen. And it was a very strong letter. It was a really strong letter. And I'm calling on you to do this. It's eerily prophetic to read it now, but
given what happened with her,
and
when she died,
yes, it's almost like she felt it, right? Like she knew.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say that, like, not to sound all woo-woo, but I think about just the way Black people, like, we celebrate each other, from like the second line in New Orleans to the Kojic churches of the Deep South. Death is not the end. It's just another stage. And so I think when we celebrate her, like, she's not gone. And I think that that's such a great thing to remind ourselves of.
Did you know that's what she believed? And she talked about that. She said, I'm not worried about death. She said it's just another
it's a stage.
Iteration is the way she put it, you know? So I'm just moving on. Yeah.
Hearing that makes me think about how in her work, she just gathered so much she could from this life with full preparation for whatever was next. And that, I'm assuming, added to her boldness to say, like, I'm not worried about how you all feel, what you think, because I'm doing what I want and need to do now in preparation for whatever's coming next. Okay, so my next question, I'm going to read one of her shorts in the book, and it's just a page or two, and I'd love for us to kind of be in conversation about it, because reading just these few pages blew my mind that she packed so much, and it speaks to that braiding of folklore and fiction. So this is on page 41 of Hitting a Straight Lick with a Crooked Stick, and it's called A Bit of Our Harlem. He came into the shop with a pitifully small amount of cheap candy to sell. The men gruffly refused to buy or to even look at his wares, and he shuffled toward the door with such a forlorn air that the young lady called him back. She was smiling partly because she liked to smile, and did so whenever fate gave her a chance, and partly to put the tattered little hunchback at his ease. The boy approached the table where the girl sat with the air of a homeless dog who hopes that he has found a friend. Let me see your candy, little boy. She toyed with the paper-wrapped packages for a little while. She knew that she would buy one even though she had but 15 cents in her pocketbook and a very vague notion to where her next week's rent would come from. The hunchback boy looked too dejected to turn away, however. She handed him a nickel. Thank you, ma'am, said the boy. You certainly is a nice lady. You ain't mean like some folks. Thank you, rejoined the girl. And where do you live? I lives down in 53rd Street. My mama, she dead when I was a baby, and my father, too, he dead. Who takes care of you? My grandma, and she teaches me the Lord's Prayer, and I goes to Sunday school when I got shoes. See this coat? Ain't it nice? A lady gave it to me. It is a pretty coat, agreed the young woman. And do you belong to the church yet? No, not yet, but I guess I will someday. A lady that used to live with us, she got religion, but after a while, her sins come back on her. Do you know my teacher? No, I don't. What does she teach you? She teach me how to read and count to 100, but I forget what comes after 97. Do you know? Let's see, 95, 96, 97. See, I can't learn that. Of course, laughed the girl. 98, 99, 100. What else does she teach you? She say when I go to heaven, I be white as snow as the angels going to take this lump out my back and make me tall. I guess maybe they roll something over my back like that machine, what they rolls out on the street with. The girl felt very much like laughing at this original idea, but seeing his serious face, she resisted and asked him very kindly how old he was. "Let's see," answered the boy. "Grandma say I'm 15, teachers say I'm 16. I guess I'm 16 because once a long time ago I was 15 before." The young lady exhibited signs of flagging interest and asked no more questions, but the boy showed no inclination to go. His eyes never left her face, and at last he asked, "Where's your mama and papa?" "Both dead." "Who takes care of you then?" "Why, I do myself." "Nobody buys you nothing to eat neither?" "No." The hunchback looked pitying at the girl, at himself, at the floor, and at last, in a full voice of pity, "I guess maybe I can put on some long pants and marry you, and then I'll buy you something to eat." The girl would have laughed, but the world of sympathy, understanding, and fellowship that showed in the boy's face and choked his voice restrained her. How often had she sought that same understanding fellowship within her own class, but how seldom she found it. "Well, lady, I'm going now because I got to make a fire in the stove for Grandma. But I come back again sometime because you're a nice lady. Maybe I'll bring you some Easter candy if I have some nickels." That's the day Jews nailed Jesus in a box and put rocks on it. But he got out. Ask the Bible. He knows. So in just those short few pages, there was commentary on class, religion, gender, and it just blows my mind how she was able to put us in this space of just running a corner store exchange. And I'd love to hear from you all, one, how maybe what you pulled from that, how that made you feel, how it speaks to her writing as a whole, but also thinking about Harlem and all of us being here in New York City, what did that moment hold for us in her understanding of Harlem and our understanding of Harlem? Either one of those questions I'd love to hear.
Well, that's a big question.
Yeah.
It is. I'm sorry, I did a bunch.
I mean, I'll talk about the first part of
Okay.
that. You really can tell that Hurston comes out of a tradition of oral history. Clearly, she heard stories and she knew how to sort of capture them and hold on to them and understood their value, right? And also, clearly, she's a folklorist. You see it so beautifully there. Because she is really carefully preserving language and preserving the way people speak to one another and the way they think. It's almost like she captures their inner lives in that dialogue, his inner life, right? His dreams, his hopes, his beliefs. It's incredible.
Well, even hers when she asked, like, "Oh, I can't turn this away because I don't get this in my class."
Exactly. So you learn something, right? In
It
that
speaks to
exchange.
so much.
It's a lot going on. And I think it has everything to do with her genuine love of folks, particularly black folks. Like, that's a radical notion, especially in the time she was living, to say, I'm going to celebrate black folks for who and what they are. That was, and we now know she had a lot of pushback from people like Langston Hughes, who did not believe she should be revealing black folks in this naked, honest way. And it makes me think about the historian, Herbert Gutman, the CUNY historian, who talked about wanting to capture history from below. And that's really it. Like, these are people who aren't well known, they're not rich, they're not fancy, they're not important, but they really reveal the true fabric of our lives. And so I just love how she honors. I try to mimic that in my own work. I'm like, I want to honor ordinary people the way Zora does. Yeah, elevates them. She elevates them.
Yeah. Anyone else? No? Okay. Thinking about elevation and thinking about the ways that she really tapped into everyday life. She wasn't looking to glamorize anything. She wasn't looking to make it something that made white people comfortable. She wasn't looking to make white people seen. There was a part where in the beginning, in the biography, where they were just talking about how white people were peripheral, if at all, in the story. And thinking of the concept of black excellence or black girl magic and what that looks like, seeing her come in and say, I'm excellent because I am, not because I've done anything that makes you feel I'm worthy of it. That really spoke to me in a sense that that really grounded me in saying, okay, as a writer and as a, like, who am I writing for? What do I need to describe when I'm writing? Am I writing for a white, and Toni Morrison talks about this a lot too, am I writing for a white audience who is being heard? And Alice Walker in Search of Our Mother's Gardens, she says, quote, that Zora brings us back to ourselves and our blackness in the most organic ways. And so I'm interested to hear from you, what has Zora brought you back to? And what has her work uncovered in you, particularly as a Black woman?
A non-Eurocentric framework of truth.
Truth is the important word in that.
And the reason why I say that is because, you know, my second book, I had to go to the Deep South and I had to speak to people whose stories, they didn't have a claim over their stories. It was often surpassed by what was documented or what the institution said. And every step of the way, I had to keep destabilizing what I thought to be true. And so much of Black oral storytelling, so much of the stories that we hold dear is not written in textbooks. That doesn't make it any less truthful. It doesn't make it any less fantastic. And so I think what's so wonderful about Zora's work is that she's not trying to prove to anyone, this is why it's true. Here's the methodology that I used. I mean, when she came to Columbia, she was going through the marble halls and libraries like, do y'all have any folklore? They're like, we don't have that here. And, you know, she said research is just formalized curiosity. She had to tell Franz Boas, you know, her mentor, that, you know, I can't be objective. Right. I have a stake in this. These are my people. And that has really influenced me as a writer, because even though I'm trying to be a researcher and trying to, you know, have this authoritative stance, I can't divorce myself from my subjects. Even if I'm not from those particular areas, the things that they were saying, I've heard them reverberated even in the North where I'm from. So I think it's for her, I think Zora Neale Hurston was just so influential in showing that just Black life is everything. Definitive statement. There needs to not be any type of criteria outside of ourselves. We get to set the standard for that.
Yeah, I feel too that she really owned the complexity and the nuance beautifully, and pushes back against this idea that Blackness is monolithic, and specifically Black womanhood. And I think about that a lot in terms of how people like to reimagine her and reimagine her politic versus looking at Zora for who she was. And I wrote this piece for Refinery 29 about the Dark Tower Literary Salon, and exploring Zora's relationship with Black philanthropy and A'Lelia Walker, but also just Zora the person. And one of the things that I thought about a lot was, well, you know, I'm not sure we would have necessarily agreed on everything. I think she would have been someone who, if now we existed on Black Twitter together, I would find her to be a problematic fave who I would support and uphold and love, but there'd be some times where I'd be like, woo, girl, you know, I got you, but I cannot retweet, right? And so, like, retweet is not endorsement. And I really thought about that because it made me think, you know, I want that. Every instinct that we are taught is that we're supposed to kind of fall in line around a political agenda around who we are as a people, and some of that is aided by patriarchy, right? And then other parts of that have to come with hypervigilance around internalized oppression. And I like that, even if I didn't agree with every perspective she had then, that she at that time was willing to say, actually, I'm going to disrupt your class narrative and your respectability politics. I am going to come up in here and thumb my nose at all of it and roll up to this party and call you all color struck about your colorism while I accept an award for my play Color Struck at the Fire Awards with all these men. Right. And so I think it's important to talk about that, because I've been involved in some conversations about Zora or panels where we've had questions from the audience saying, oh, but I found out this really problematic thing about her, and what do you think about her now? And I think I'm so glad that readers get to read about the complexity of who we are as Black folks. Why should all of our heroes have to be perfect? That's racist. And I think that it's important for us to think about that.
Absolutely. And sexist.
And sexist, yes.
And sexist. I do love that she debunked debunked respectability. Like coming out the gate, she didn't care. And I love that every time she talked about putting her hat on, it was reckless. So like there was this abandonment of what you thought she should look like. And I think that's what informs my work now, is that I don't have to be perfect. I can have a moment, my character can have a moment where they have issues with colorism, and they still like only like the light-skinned people, and they don't know why. They just know that it is. And I mean, it's human. Yeah, and she let them be human, and didn't give a perfect Disney bow at the end, because we still surviving, and most of us don't even make it out. So what does it mean to just read the story as you're going through it and experience all the hardship, and know you're gonna have to walk away and still you still need therapy, boo. Like. It's not over. The story doesn't mean you're fixed. So yeah, I do like that about her as well.
And I feel as though we don't often stop to think about not only the fact that she created her life, like she made herself to be what she wanted to be in the world, because it didn't exist. So she just pushed it into existence. I mean, just the fact that she made her age 10 years younger. Yes. One reason it was practical. She wanted to go back to high school and thought, well, if I do that at 26, it'll look a little odd. So I look like I'm 16, so I'll say I am. And so it was a necessity, because education was so important to her. So it wasn't really vanity. It was like, I am creating this Zora character, and so she needs to be this age. And that's really self-possession and autonomy in a really incredible way. And also, I'll quickly add that we also often forget how much male critics attacked her and attacked her work throughout her career. All of those, I mean, if you go back and listen to and read what Richard Wright had to say about Their Eyes Were Watching God, you will be like, what? I mean, this is clearly a classic. We now understand it to be a masterpiece. But some of what Zora had to do in her life came out of what she was up against and the support she didn't get. And it makes what she accomplished even more incredible. How was she able to be so prolific given the sexism that she was facing on a daily basis and within the publishing world and with her own colleagues, right? So, you know, I think that's also a great lesson, that she's a woman of survival. Self-creation and survival. How about that? You know?
This is a petty note, but even though, like, I think about it this way, like, Richard Wright may have gotten Zora Neale Hurston, but then James Baldwin got Richard Wright.
He tore him down. Yes, he did.
It's called karma.
He ate him up. I was like, yeah, well... Sorry, had to add that.
You don't need no more protest now. And then Baldwin went and wrote one. Okay. You're right.
All right, so I'm going to really quickly, because I want to read from this book as well, and it's the note from Alice Walker for the 40th anniversary. I'm just going to read the last paragraph of what she said. She said, the reclamation of Zora Neale Hurston, the genuine enjoyment and acceptance of her gifts, and especially of Mules and Men and Their Eyes Were Watching God, is healing news for the peoples of Earth, because it means a reviving memory of and connection to the folk spirit of Earth's peoples is not impossible for us. We can allow our ancestors to roam freely in consciousness and remain or become an internal support for us and for all coming generations. We have across the planet missed this folk spirit and our ancestral tribes, their laughter, dreams, wit, and scandalous tales, no less for their vision or for their wisdom more than we knew. Wow. And I loved reading that, and it speaks so much to a lot of conversation around inspiration, our ancestors, what we're pulling from and what we're tapping into. So I would really love to hear from each of you in your writing. How have you tapped into the ancestry of Zora in particular? How has her fingerprint in any way been put into your writing?
Oh my God.
The healing news.
You know, as a novelist, I remember when I was sitting there reading this reader and discovered the excerpt from her first novel, Jonah's Gourd Vine. It's really an incredible sort of retelling of who her father was. And I read this a year after my own father had died. And I'm only now making this connection. My first novel, many years later, is a coming-of-age novel about a girl and her father. And I did the same thing. I used fiction to recreate my father on the page in all this complexity. And now I'm certain that that was lingering for me, that imprint of how Zora pulled it off, so that I could draw from that. And then one other really, I think, biggest influence for me, when I look at all the work I've done, the novels as well as the screenplay and the memoir, she, especially with Janie in Their Eyes Were Watching God, it was all about self-journey and exploration, self-love ultimately, and an understanding that she had this internal life and she could move forward and figure out who she wanted to be in the world. And when I look back at my own work, I'm like, that's what all my books are about. A black woman trying to figure that out for herself. So yeah, thank you, Zora.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, I thanked Zora in the acknowledgments of our forthcoming book. One of the editors of that book also edited Barracoon. And again, when I was doing field work in the Deep South by myself with just a recorder, notebook and pen, I can't like fully articulate how many times I just felt protected. Like I knew no one out there. I was driving along back roads, across bridges, across waters where God knows what happened to people's ancestors out there. And I just felt like I was covered the entire time, no matter if the people that I met who made sure that, I got to my hotel safely and then wanted to connect me to another person. It just was like, it felt like a literal shield that was around me the entire time, which let me know that I'm doing the work that I'm supposed to be doing.
I love that.
She's looking out for you.
Yeah, I just feel as if so many of the words, her wisdom, I hear her whispers, right, in my head, like when you were talking about the mule of the world, and I remember when I heard that, I was forever changed. But she also has a quote about how it's important to speak up because if you don't, they'll kill you and say that you liked it. And I think of that often in the current political moment, in the current cultural moment. Thought about it a lot as it related to the Harvey Weinstein verdict today and conversations about how this is finally putting to bed this idea about what about Harvey Weinstein as it relates to Bill Cosby, for example, and to think about, that what does it mean that I've inherited, and many of us have inherited these narratives that we are supposed to be burdened with the pain of everyone around us that we fearlessly can't self-express without cost to our communities, be they white feminist communities or black male communities, that like, why can't we be who we are and be free? And dealing with that struggle throughout my life because of the conditioning. So that quote has really been one that I've put in the margins of every journal I've had whenever I hear the voices saying, oh, if you write that, you will be punished. If you write that, you will be shunned. If you write that, you will be scapegoated and betrayed, because that's my trauma language. And then to remember people like Zora to know if you write that, you will be free. And I'm grateful for her for that.
Thank you.
That gave me goosebumps. Ooh.
I know.
Zora gave me language, permission to have my own language, to construct my own body, to remember my history in a way that doesn't cause me to be the victim or the villain, the hero. Like there isn't any linear way to be. It isn't. I mean, she just gave me so much spirit. So when I write, I don't write with humility. I'm not like, I'm gonna play small. I'm taking up all the space. I'm drawing outside the lines. I'm cursing if I feel like it. I love that. I don't bend for language. Language bends for me. And reading her, I felt like, oh, I can take the G off and it means something else to someone else. And that's okay. You know what I mean? I did this poem for PBS, and it's the first. All right, so I'm old. and my poem went viral on the internets. I didn't know what that meant. I was like, that's great. What's that? And my daughter had to tell me. She's like, Mom, it's really good. I was like, oh, okay. And then she said, don't read the comments.
Oh yeah, no.
So what I do?
Read the comments.
Yep,
All right, click. Whoa, first thing I see is what about white girl magic? And I was like, babe, you got all of the world. America, everything is yours. What you talking about?
Yeah.
But it was that moment that I was like, word. The next one, what about white girl magic? Second one was, I can't trust this poet because of the language. She's not even saying supposed to correctly.
Yeah.
And then I was like, for like 2 whole minutes, I was upset with myself. Like, oh, I should have written the whole word out. You're right, I know better. And then I thought, you're wildin'. Like, I'm gonna, not only am I going to say this poem every time I touch a stage, but the next thing that happened is I published that poem with Macmillan, and that it sold out. It went into Target. It did all of these things. But for a really quick second, I thought, you're right. This shouldn't go viral. I shouldn't be remembered. I'm doing it wrong because I'm not speaking the Queen's English. You know, forgive me. And then I had to remember who came before me and who made it possible for me to speak the language that my grandmother knows, to speak the language that my grandfather adores, and it is because of this woman.
Thank you for that. I would like to answer my own question.
Yes.
Because as someone who studied anthropology, Zora is just such a beautiful, bright spot in the sky for me to look to on how to manipulate colonial ideals to be to the benefit of the community that I love so much. And her quote, there are years that ask questions and years that answer, really gave me permission to exist as someone asking questions and then exist as someone sharing my answers and not feeling like I have to be the expert in all things at all times in all ways, that I can look at the world with the deep curiosity, not to become lauded for anything in particular, but to be recognized for telling the truth. And just that quote of asking questions and getting answers and giving myself the space to exist in both ways, to be indulgent in the not knowing and indulgent in the knowing, has been really special to me as someone who often feels like a novice, who often feels the imposter syndrome of stepping into a space to know, like, well, maybe this is just a question year and I'm gonna ask all the questions I need until I'm ready for an answer year and I can share and learn along with the people that I'm continuing to learn with. Thank you all so much for such insightful and heartfelt answers. And we are going to open it up to the audience for questions. They're back in the back running around with microphones. So we're going to take audience questions, if there are any. You all have like the most fire panel in front of you right now. I highly suggest you talk to them. Thank you. Is it on? You can hear me? Maybe speak a little louder.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for sharing your various perspectives. What I appreciate about the diversity of the panel is that there are different spaces you're operating in. Academia, performance. I think it's very important for us to cultivate our voice in all of those spaces. Some of them have more money than others. Some of them have more regulation than others. But I was wondering if you have advice on how we as Black women can hold each other accountable but not devolve into just the cliches of sister, girlfriend, honey child. Like, what does accountability with respect look like? Because I don't want to be the person on Essence.com tearing anyone down, but I also know what it costs me as a Black woman when you speak recklessly. So what are the ways that we can develop standards, or is that just impossible?
No, I think you can. Like, I hate the word drag. I hate it. It's violent. It makes me conjure up such violent imeges of people of color, be honest
Actually
with you.
being dragged.
Yes, actually being dragged.
Yes.
And I think what it metastasizes in this current period is with social media. It is so easy for humiliation to become carnivalesque. and to not understand that wokeness is not some linear path. It's jagged, it's full of false starts, and there's so many blind spots that we all have. And often I feel like there's like this performance to be right all the time. I remember during my first, when my first book came out, like, there was a woman that was going back and forth with me, and I said, you know, on the internet, and I just like, you right, because she was right. And she was like, oh, I thought you were gonna have an argument with me. I'm not your enemy, and I don't know who told you that I was your enemy. It's okay to call someone in while still maintaining empathy and grace, to be like, that person's not there yet. It's not like they're digging in their heels, they just don't know, just like we don't know. And the one thing I'm often afraid about is like when you talk about problematic faces, like how many black women creators, black women artists that may not be able to produce the breadth of work that Zora has now because they're so afraid that if they get something wrong, somebody is going to humiliate them to the point of paralysis. And like, I don't even want to try again. So I think it is so important for us as black women to understand that, like, many of us are trying and we are going to make mistakes as artists, and that to call someone in with love and to also understand, like, we need that empathy. Like, we can't lose our softness. The world is gonna make us hard enough. So I think it's always important to call someone out, and it's easier to be like, okay, you know, this is where you went wrong, rather than, oh, you trash for that. You see, there's a difference to saying something, you know? So I think, yeah, we have to hold each other accountable and be sisters, but also, you know, envelop that in love too.
I like that call in instead of out.
Yeah.
When I call you in, it's with love and compassion. When I call you out, it's adversarial. I also think there's a lot of tribe work that can happen on the back end. Everything doesn't need to happen on Twitter. 100%. People are highly defensive, and there are trolls who are excited.
Yes.
You called it carnivalesque. That was excellent. I need that T-shirt immediately, because they just waiting. They're like, ooh, who hates who? I hate everybody. I don't want none of y'all to win. I'm in this cubicle. I hate my job. Y'all look like y'all are having fun. I want you to lose. What can I do to incite more? So I think tribe work on the back end, and sometimes it's just, you have an email, can I talk to you? Sometimes it's, hey, Jamia, you know this person, can you hook me up with work? You know what I mean? Like, make it really about the work between people, so that we can be better for our community, for our own art. So, I mean, cancel culture really is trash. I don't like it.
And you gotta be
so
careful
bad.
too, because
it's not good.
I'll just say it. Someone who's on the internet a lot of times people like to see black people fighting in public as a spectator sport.
Oh yeah.
Protect your people and protect your energy, because people will just watch and laugh and hee hee ha ha because they want to see people. They want to see us get riled up. They want to see division in that way.
Yeah, I think about it a lot. I was thinking about, you know, a Twitter beef that I had been engaged in years ago. Yeah, not recently.
Who beef with you?
It was a younger me. It was a younger me, and I had, you know, I had engagement and said beef also, but I remember when it was happening, and, you know, for a while I wasn't saying anything, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to react. I finally just kind of found the emails of the people this was going on with and said, you know, I just had someone in my family pass away. I have all these things that are happening right now. I agree with you on most things. We have an active disagreement with this. It is happening in public as spectacle. Can we get on a conference call with another party to mediate it who we both respect, so we can talk this through, because we are black women trying to do the thing, and I want to build with you. I respect you. And immediately got an email back saying, I'm so sorry you're going through that, sis.
Yeah.
Let's just squash this. And then since we've supported each other's work, that kind of thing, and it never had to come up again. And so I also think, like what you were saying about just not treating each other as if we're disposable, that, you know, on all sides of when this kind of thing can happen. I mean, it was a lot for me to finally get to that point of just saying, I got to show them my humanity and remind them that I am them and they are me. Right? And it was eating me alive. But then I finally just thought, you know, we actually share experience, and I can hear in the critique, that's very hard for me to be compassionate about right now, but I'm trying. I can hear in it a familiar pain. So let's have a conversation. And so I want to have more of those conversations, because I found and then, you know, there's some people, like 10%, where if you try that, it's still going to be wild. They're still going to want the carnival, like you said. But I do think with most sincere, genuine people, when you kind of have that conversation, it can create a bridge where there were walls. And I think we need to have more of those conversations as people. And I think we need to have more conversations amongst ourselves that don't need to be, like you said, parsed out and dissected by others who don't understand.
And I totally agree that it's often a spectacle. It's a carnival, it's this space. And just to say another success story of connection, I recently had a piece out in Harper's Bazaar, and I said a line that is very similar to something another Black woman says. And she literally messaged me, and she's like, Rachel, I'm getting a bunch of tweets saying Rachel Cargill stole your work. And I'm like, but they clearly didn't read the article because I said she said, and then I said what she said. But they pulled out for the title just that part. So it looked like I said it originally, but the people clearly didn't read. So before even reading, they got so excited about the potential of disagreement between me and this other Black woman. So she called me she DM'd me and said, Rachel, can I call you? And I said, of course. And we sat on the phone and laughed about how irrational it was that the people didn't even read. And even though we both knew what had been happening, we decided to make that, to fortify each other in that space, to say we are going to enjoy each other's company as opposed to participate in this spectacle. And so I share that story in addition to what everyone else said to remind that it's possible, and I took a note, the level-headedness of compassion. When we get all riled up, we start saying things and doing things that don't even make sense, that we know from social media will be there forever, and it'll come back 8 years from now when we're not even thinking about it anymore. So just that the level-headedness of compassion is what I hope we can infuse, because there is deep power in claiming the narrative of what everyone else is trying to turn into a circus, as Jania said.
Hi. So when I think of Zora, I think of someone, to me, her existence is almost mythological, which I think is both a product of how almost lost she was and also how bold she was. And I wonder, from each of your experiences, doing the work that you do, moving through the spaces that you've moved through, what do you tap into to manifest your most authentic self? How do you take up space? How do you break past the barriers of what people have spoken about, internalizing notions of what's possible, notions of what's normal? How have you gotten past some of those internal barriers to be where you are now and to have the momentum to do the work that you want to do moving forward?
That's a great question.
It is. I would just say that it's terrifying. It's one of those things that I would kind of describe it, kind of that motivation to push into what you're capable of. I always say, people say, like, why did you move to New York? Why did you start this? Why did you do that? And my answer is always, I just wanted to see what I was capable of. It's like a gift to myself, like pushing myself to see, like, what can you do? What would New York look like for you? What would writing a book look like for you? What would speaking your mind look like for you? And it's kind of like investing in yourself, taking a risk on yourself to, like, I don't know, it's kind of fun in a way. Like, so what you gonna do now, girl? Like, how is this gonna look? What is this gonna feel like? And so betting on myself, betting on yourself in the way that she said, Zora is so, she has so much agency in that she doesn't feel the need to be defined before she takes the step. And I think giving yourself that grace to say, I'm definitely not gonna let them define me, so let me see what my highest values are and walk in that, and then let that define me. So betting on myself has been...
I love that expression, betting on yourself. You know, I think that it's only in writing this memoir about my mother that I really came to understand how scary it can be to tell the truth. Because my mother ran an illegal numbers operation, and it was a secret our whole lives. And then suddenly I'm telling the world about it. So that was scary. But actually, she also taught me, this is not ironic, that whatever you do in life, you should do it with integrity. So she ran an underground lottery business with integrity. And that's what I ask myself about everything I do. Am I doing it with integrity? Not am I doing it without mistakes? Do I know what's going to happen? No. Am I a little nervous? Of course. Will people criticize me? Maybe. But if I know that I'm doing it with integrity, then I feel a little fearless. You know? Yeah.
I let myself be soft and vulnerable, and I take a lot of breaks, which is not normal for me. I do too much, and then I'm like, oh, I'm losing it. But so now I just like January through March, I live in Miami, which is hilarious because I can't afford it, but I'm there anyway. Figuring it out, residency, no doubt. I don't like the winter. It's cold shit. It's for the birds. And I am in Miami on a beach with a margarita and writing and reading. And I'm allowing myself to do the thing that I've always wanted to do. And I've been told I may not have the right to do.
Yeah, one of the reasons I do a lot of writing for younger readers and children's books and really young readers is because I feel the need to be accountable to my younger self. There's something about that young part of myself before sort of the outside conditioning of self-judgment, that freedom that she had, meaning me, at that time, that just understanding that I was enough. And I am enough, 100%. The sky's the limit, the vision that I had when I wanted to be an astronaut, historian, biographer, and president, you know. And I think supermodel was on the list too because of TV. But I think that I think of her and actually keep a picture of my younger self based on advice from my friend Megan Watterson to do that and write these books for younger readers because those were the books I wish that I had. And that is a healing process for me to remember to think you're authentic. Before you ever achieved anything, got any degrees, got any of these sort of worldly sort of descriptors or frameworks that are supposed to give you clout and credibility, you are enough. And from my spiritual belief, you are connected to divine source, and that makes you powerful and in purpose. And that is what guides me whenever I feel like I am not true to myself, I am not being true to the Most High. And I always bring it back to that.
Yeah, I don't ask permission for shit. I just don't. Like, sorry, but I don't. Like, even when I was like an editorial assistant, I was like, I'm gonna write what I want to write. If the person says no, I'm gonna go someplace else. If they say no, I'm gonna go to this person. Like, always had an alternative lined up. And the way that I always looked at it is like, don't wait for the train to come, because once the train comes, it might be full. So you might as well just write your own stories. And I'm always afraid. I'm always afraid with everything that I write because, like I said, like I'm on the internet a lot, and you could see how people will make up things they don't even read, or they take, you know, one paragraph out of like a 5,000 word essay and just, you know, it can run wild with it. But I tell myself someone once told me, another writer, they told me, they were like, but did you lie though? And I said, no, right. So that's why I was like, I never lie in anything that I say. If it makes you uncomfortable, that's fine too. But I didn't lie. I can't sanitize who I am. And part of the reason why I write is because I have the expanse of a book to be able to say what my childlike self never could. And so for me, like, I think it's okay to be afraid. Just don't let it paralyze you. It's okay. Like, I think a lot of times writers, they try to wait until the moment where they're not afraid, and then they so much time has gone by. Just acknowledge that it's there, and acknowledge that this is where you really doing the work now, because now you're stretching yourself, and have your tribe. Like, there were so many people who, like, I cried to, I didn't think I could make it, and they had to tell me to, like, you did it one time, you're gonna do it again. And I really admired that. So make sure that you know that you got your village. And I had to remind myself, I'd have like these mantras of like, you are loved. And so when I would reach out to people, I'm like, you know what, this ain't coming together, like it is gonna come together. Come on out, get a drink, and then go back, and you'll finish it.
Yeah. Do we have time for more questions? Okay, cool, there's right there. Hi. She's behind you with the microphone if you wanted to use that.
I want to see. I have a statement and then a question. So I'm sorry. I just want to say thank you. I just saw Zora Neale Hurston's name, and that made me want to come. I was ignorant of the panel, but it's been wonderful to be here. When I saw the bios, it made me want to read all the books that were mentioned in the bios.
As you should.
Thank you, right? And so it reminds me, like Zora, reading Their Eyes Were Watching God gave me my life, right? Because I left a marriage, my first marriage, and I was scared and I didn't know what I could do. I had 2 children. My children are in their 30s now, and I'm a grandmother. But when I left, I didn't know who I was, and I'm still becoming who I am. But that book changed my life. It just gave me light and love and guidance. And I still don't read a lot of fiction, but that book I give it to every young person that I talk to about reading. I gave it to my niece a couple of weeks ago. She came over. She's struggling with some things. And I said, this is a beautiful book to read. And so I started reading Morgan, your book. I bought it because I wanted that first chapter. I want my 14-year-old. Just what you're talking about your middle school into high school experience. My granddaughter is going through that, and so I'm on the train. I said, okay, I got to give this to my granddaughter to read. Because it's the struggles, right? And you, sister, I'm not on Twitter, Instagram, any of those things, but I do want to read that poem. I'd like to know the name of that poem and what you're doing here with your work and with this event is reminding us that the legacy of African people on this stolen land is about passing it on. We are the embodiment of people that didn't accomplish, that it was illegal for us to read and write. And so the fact that you are accomplishing what you have and what you will continue to, and what Zora didn't receive in her lifetime is being passed on now. It's about the generational thing, the intergenerational and the passing it on. So I'm really happy. I went to work and I went home, but I came back out because I said I'm going.
That's the thing.
So I just want to say
Thank you.
And you better look like you ain't got no grandkids. All right now. Teach us your ways.
Anything else?
So don't forget to give me the name of the
Black Girl Magic, it's right there.
Oh, okay.
Black Girl
All
Magic.
the books of the authors are there. All right, we are going to take one more question. Yes. They're running up with the mic. She's jogging.
Thank you all so much. I just have emotion like here, listening to all of you. My question is, if you had 5 minutes with Zora right now, what would you want to say to her? What question would you have for her?
I would just love to sit with her and bash the field of anthropology, like just talk about, like, isn't it crazy how, like, just kind of going back and forth about the field, which I love so much, that she has inspired so much in me. I would just love to kind of have a complain session with her about why is it like this right now?
I would only say thank you.
Yeah,
honestly,
that's what I was gonna say. But
I would just say thank you and ask
Yeah.
what she wants to drink. She's like, whiskey or gin?
How does it feel to finally get your due?
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about that. Talk about all the millions of people who know about her and read her work now.
Yeah.
And she'd have something funny to say, I'm sure. Yeah.
I think I'd ask her if she would consider herself a feminist.
Right on brand. That's what brand.
I think so.
Because there's some people who I've gone back and forth with who have said, you know, be careful with your analysis around her, because there are a lot of signs that point to the fact that she probably would not have in terms of how we define ourselves as feminists. But for me, I think the embrace that Black feminism has had of her is also meaningful. So I kind of want to be like, how do you feel about our embrace, our cause célèbre around you, right? And to, you know, would you align with intersectional feminism? Womanism, yes.
That's a good one. Womanism.
I think I would ask her who else from the past we should be reading that people don't know about.
Yes. That was a good one, Morgan.
Good one.
And then I'd also ask her recipes, because I really can't cook. I need some help.
Oh, and are there some hidden manuscripts
That we
with which
still
we need
don't
to
know.
find so I can publish it immediately?
I know she got a diary somewhere. Like, I know she got something.
I was just thinking I probably would sit back and ask her. I would just want to see her and Alice Walker in conversation.
Yes.
I like wouldn't even have anything to say. I would just want to see them interacting with each other. Thank you for that question. That was really great. All right, that was our last question. A round of applause for our incredible